there's always a way to get access should some major, quick moving.
I don't anticipate that, just curious.
And again, I think, I appreciate you're right. I feel like there was something in here that talked about given the change in interest rates since I think that's, to me, a key point is that we're trying to fulfill our fiduciary obligation here and saying.
We're away from the 0.2%, and now we're.
But we're not, this is not an investment pool that was.
It's not a hedge fund.
Right, and so, I mean,
What are we doing?
if you look at the four, I mean, they're basically all cash equivalents anyway.
Pretty close.
Pretty close. So I think we're fulfilling our fiduciary obligation, and I think we're also, in conjunction with that, keeping safety and security in mind. I had one question on the, I don't know if this was in there before, and I just see it in the yield section, that first sentence, the investment portfolio should be designed with the objective of attaining a market rate of return throughout budgetary and economic cycles.
That's the language that's in the municipal policy, I just copied it.
Okay,
And I guess I think what that's intended to say is market conditions change. Sometimes a 2% return on investment is good.
yeah.
Sometimes
I-
5%, sometimes
I unfortunately.
half a percent.
Yeah, I have my hindsight 2020 classes on all the time, and someone reads that 5 years from now and says, I think you should have earned 4% and you only earned 1%, and you think we're mad that you didn't earn what you should have earned, and we feel like you haven't done your job.
Well, that's why
It's
the
kind of a general-
comma comes in and say, taking into account investment risk constraints
Okay,
and
yeah.
liquidity
Okay,
needs.
so that gives us the
That's-
flexibility you think we need.
That's
to
the
say.
spirit of the language.
Okay.
You know, again, we don't want to get into hyper-aggressive
Agreed.
investment strategies.
Absolutely not, yeah. And then you mentioned something about authorized investments. Something that I don't think is in here is our process with respect to the actual investments and the changes in investments. Would our expectation be that would all come back to the full CDA for review and approval?
Well, investments need to be approved by the CDA. Yeah.
So any changes?
So I will, if this is approved, I will come back at the next meeting with the recommendation for the CDA.
All right.
Then however that is worded, we can execute that.
Got it, okay, thank you.
I had a question on this is not specific to the investment policy, but on the loan program. So at the last meeting, we voted on the Kensington liquor loan. If we have losses related to that loan, and we have to write down some of it, is that coming back to the loan program at the CDA?
The loss?
Yeah.
Well, the loss would be a write-off against your receivables
Yeah.
for loans. So
Which
yes,
are
that's
here.
inside.
Versus going to the board.
Inside the
Yeah.
CDA,
No,
yeah.
Yeah, I'd say it stays within the CDA.
Okay, I just want to
It's
clarify.
against that balance, yeah.
I mean, do you see in terms of the yield, in terms of like the general village fund versus the CDA funds, I mean, I'm assuming they'd be roughly comparable, is what you're kind
Very
of
similar,
proposing here.
yeah. I mean, I think the village gets maybe 25 to 50 basis points more because we do get into some longer term
Okay.
bonds and stuff. But that's fairly tight historically, so, yeah,
Should be better.
fairly consistent.
And I guess that's good. This is consistent with the villages. I mean, there's nothing we have in here that is inconsistent with the village's policy.
That's
and
correct.
approach.
Do we need a motion on this?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. Do I have a motion?
I'll move to approve, what's the name of it, the
Deposits.
CDA deposits and investment policy.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we got an investment policy, yay. That's a big deal, I think, that's good, that's responsibility right there. Okay, moving on to item, we're cruising along, item 5, it's gonna jinx us right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you, sorry about that. Addendum to the MOU between the village and the CDA, I believe specifically as it relates to this new investment policy that we just approved. I believe the only change in the document is in item 2, fiscal agent. Is that correct?
Yes, we're recommending, ultimately the motion will be to approve and recommend to the village board for approval as well. We're striking the restriction that all CDA funds be held in the village general checking account.
Yep.
You know, we've got some whereas clauses here and
Yep.
also some standard language that, I'm pretty sure it would be implicit in our past working relationship with the village board that, they would want to, be a part of the process should CDA want to amend their investment policy. So, that's what the, item three is about, so, but yeah, that's the only change that I thought that we needed to make to the MOU to allow the, investment policy and investment CDA funds to be executed.
I'll move to approve, the addendum to, what am I doing?
MOU.
To the MOU between the CDA and the Village of Shorewood.
I'll second that.
And recommend to the village board for their approval as well. Part of that motion, please.
And I'll move to approve the addendum to the MOU between the CDA and the Village of Shorewood and recommend for approval and recommend that this be brought to the village board for approval.
I'll second, I'll continue to second that.
All those approved, in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Okay,
Thank you.
yes. Next item, item 6, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Housing market study RFP. I guess he's not here. Thank you, Bart, for putting this together. I think it's a very good document. I don't know if you have any opening comments on it?
No, we took a look at it, and I know that there was a document that you had reviewed at the last meeting, so we kind of put that out there to get the feelers out, get some input. The input you provided as a group was incorporated, and then we also went through and added a couple more questions, just that spoke to specific questions that we've had as a community, you know, to just more narrowly target it. But we believe that it's ready to go unless there's any other questions or concerns from this group.
Go ahead.
I have a question, and I don't wanna open up a huge can of worms here, but,
Sure.
again, not to slow us down and get us really bogged down, but in light of the discussions at the board level on historical preservation, we kinda hint at it in here.
Sorry,
Yep.
could you,
Just, we've talked about whether we wanna prioritize historical preservation, look at historical preservation, as something that we wanna assign to certain structures within the village.
okay.
And that's been an ongoing conversation over the course of a few meetings. So I'm wondering if we wanna ask a question, and maybe this is jumping the gun, ask a question about that in this housing study. You know, what would, and I don't have a good one, like what would the impact be of historical preservations if we designated certain homes or properties? Something like that. I'm just wondering if that's something we wanna get into or something we wanna avoid for now.
It's very likely, based upon the board's last conversation, that the historic preservation and education component of that is gonna take place in the first 6 months of next year.
Okay,
So if we did ask the question to get feedback, I think it would be a good opportunity to do that.
You're talking about asking the question of the entity that's running the study.
Yes.
Have them
Mhm.
To
look
get their-
into, answer some historical preservation
Well,
question.
how is it gonna relate to housing then?
Yeah.
and that's what I'm thinking through. Would it relate to housing? Would it be, I mean, I guess maybe we don't know enough about where we're going, and I wasn't at the last board meeting in all
Sure.
fairness, so,
Yeah.
I feel like it's, I think to your point, for the board, it's an important question and to get some data. I think it's a bit of an aside to what we're trying to accomplish in this study. And I wouldn't wanna distract the group from focusing on what we need to do. I don't know if you think it's just if it's a simple ad, you know, I guess since we're doing this, I wouldn't wanna, not do it if it's relatively straightforward, but it sounds to me like it's a decent amount of work and would require some research and.
if it's a rabbit hole, I don't know that I need to go down here. I just wanted to, again, this, I wasn't privy to the last conversation on historical preservation, but I just wanted to raise it just in case,
Mhm.
so we didn't miss an opportunity if we felt like it was something we wanted to tie in. But again, if it leads us down a huge rabbit hole and we lose the purpose of the study here because we're focusing
Right.
on this nebulous concept, I don't wanna do that either.
Could you go, when you started, you had a question in mind, could you repeat the question? No, I like the way you phrased it, only
Well, yeah,
because,
cause you said something about, well, cause this is about collecting data,
yes.
Right.
right? So, what data would we collect regarding
Yeah.
historic preservation?
The other communities' activities associated
maybe.
with it, what
Okay.
do others, and I'm just making this up, but what do others do with respect to answering this question, or if they move down this path, what have they done to address it?
Mhm.
But
What are
not,
the-
but
what are
not
the
taking it
implications
further
of it?
to fit, what is the impact? Cause that's not where this is going.
Yeah, I guess that's right.
Yeah,
So this is just collecting data, figuring out what impact that might have if we designate 50% of the houses in Shorewood as historic, you know, that's a whole nother question.
Well, but
Right,
we're
I
also,
mean-
but we're also looking at, we're asking to, suggest policy, aren't
We
we?
are, I agree.
Mhm.
Yeah.
We're asking for their guidance and expertise.
Mhm.
It's not just data, I would
It's-
agree, it's
And
also
around-
based on your,
Houses.
yeah, exactly,
Around,
yes.
right, I'm not sure
Yeah.
how the historic preservation is gonna impact housing. I mean, you might say, well, let's say we designate anything from 1920 older historic, and that means that that would increase costs to
right,
remodel or do anything,
Mhm.
at least on the exterior. But, you know, we already have the DRB, so I mean, if you're doing anything major on the exterior of the building, but,
Yeah.
Who's
but
the "we" in that?
the-
If we
the vil-
designate,
the
who-
village.
the village can designate something as
Well, that's-
historic
So
on
I
a
don't
village
even-
level?
I don't know.
That just strikes me as it's different
I was
entity
just,
that
I was
does
just, I mean, I'm just trying to say,
No, I-
what would the impact on housing be? I mean, it could have a cost, if we said, okay, the whole village is a historic area, you know, then the cost that's
that.
gonna
But I'm
increase
saying,
costs.
when you say "we," who is that "we"? We don't have any purview to do that, does the village even? Like, could we have said Abel's house is historic and we can't tear it down? Who could have done that? Not saying we should have, don't wanna get political, but.
Right.
I
You're
don't
asking-
think
Is this just
Addressing
data
a
in a
process
vacuum, or
question.
is there an actionable
I
thing
think
at the end of this
the most
survey?
thing you could,
Can
my
we even
understanding
designate
is the
something
most thing you
historic?
could do is if we had already had an ordinance in place and we had already designated
Yes.
that his house, then he would have had to wait a while before he did what he wanted to do. That's my understanding.
so the we would, okay,
Is it the
two things. No, it actually wouldn't be the village, it would be the State Historical
That's what I
Society.
thought.
So they previously had come through the village, and, that house has not been specifically designated by them in the past. However, one of the things that we had talked about with the board and their prioritization, schedule, because this came up and was unanimously supported by the group, was to engage with, there's kind of the guru of, historical preservation at the state, have him come in and actually educate us as a community on what the different options are, and what the processes are in different communities and standing practices that are already out there. There are the village could take steps to implement ordinances that had different parameters within them. But I think we first need to go through the educational process first of learning what the pros and cons and the benefits or, you know, negatives are to that. And then have more of a community discussion before we take a next step in terms of how we proceed. So,
Yeah.
right now, our ordinance does address historic preservation, and trustee Ment is correct. If it was previously designated, then it would have allowed a time period by the State Historical Society.
It had to have been designated by them. Do we have any
Correct.
influence on them, or do we make recommendations to them?
No, from my understanding, and having worked with them in a prior community, they will make their determination on buildings. Many times it's done at the property owner's request.
Okay.
So,
So it sounds to me like there is a process that the board is going through to maybe find a path that's separate than this, so I would propose that we not include anything.
I'm okay with that, I wanted to have the
You okay with-
discussion.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
it's a great
that makes-
question, though,
I think it
'cause
makes sense.
It is a good question. Okay, everybody?
Yeah.
I don't like it, actually. I don't think You might
should be
just
part of it.
mention it to whoever is selected, that
Yep.
this is an issue that, and they might go, oh, well then, you know, we might say this or that, but,
Sure.
Well, if they have an opinion, they'll tell us.
yeah, but we need to make them aware that this is something else
Something
that's going
that's
on in the.
If they do
bubbling
their
on another
homework, they should
pot.
already know.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to inform
If
you.
they're doing their research, they should
I
know.
like that metaphor.
Well, I guess depending on what if they're from another state or something, they may not be so in tune to.
They should be. They need to know what's going on in this village if they're gonna do this study. So they should be in tune with what's going on and what some of the concerns are, so.
Well, Dusty, I was curious at what your, it could be, this is your first meeting and you're the housing guru. Was there anything in here
Yeah.
that, what was your, did it seem like this would be useful information and give us stuff that will be useful?
Oh,
as
yeah,
thinking
I
about
thought
house?
so, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I was
Go ahead.
surprised at some of the statistics, and it was well laid out, a lot of details. I wouldn't want the job.
I wanted to, there was one thing in here, and I apologize, I left my copy at home that I had marked up, but there was they were talking about affordability. And it did not distinguish between what I thought affordability in buying a home versus renting a home. And I can't remember where the heck I saw that, but it was kind of, it seemed like it was more geared towards just purchasing rather than renting.
Looks like three, I think
Yeah.
so, three the first one.
Rentals typically are commercial property when you get over 4 units.
That's what it is. Okay, so yeah, this last bullet point here, rental market analysis, including information on
Okay,
existing.
Page two.
He's on
Okay,
page
two,
2,
okay.
bottom.
Rental market analysis, including information on existing rental properties over 4 units related to rent size. Okay, we have a ton of rental units